Well, stories have been the foundation for education for all of humanity. I mean, the cavemen put their stories on the walls in the caves. The Indians had stories, and they put it on pieces of leather hide for their ancestors or their heirs. And so it's been done like forever for stories and stories and stories. And I guess it's educational in a lot of ways to educate the people that come after you. If you don't put it down, the story's going to fade away. It's going to be gone. And I think it's so important. And storytelling, for me, has just been automatic. For some reason, I just tell stories. I had my best friend from home said, "Jimmy, you've been organizing us and telling stories since elementary school." I said, "Yeah, I guess I have."
Today's guest is someone who has spent a lifetime collecting stories. Not just his own, but the stories of an entire generation of fellow military men who served, sacrificed, and lived extraordinary lives. Jim Paulk is a 91-year-old Navy veteran, submarine officer, husband, and storyteller. He recently compiled more than 80 stories from his U.S. Naval Academy classmates into a remarkable book called Shaking Up the World: Stories of the Naval Academy Class of 1957. In our conversation, Jim talks about the process of bringing those voices together, the friendships that have shaped him, and why preserving stories matters. Not just for history, but for future generations. You'll hear Jim tell stories that are inspiring, heartbreaking, amazing, and funny. I must say, I was completely surprised with how much energy and enthusiasm he has. I couldn't help but imagine him having an intoxicating inspiration on everyone he knew and met. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. All right. Well, Mr. Jim Paulk, thank you for being with me today. I have some information about you here. You were born and raised in Brunswick, Georgia. That's a small coastal town in South Georgia. As a boy, you always wanted to attend the U.S. Naval Academy out in Annapolis. You entered the academy in 1953, and you are officially in the graduating class of 1957. After graduating, you served as a submarine officer in the Navy. You held roles as electronics officer, communications officer, and engineering officer aboard the USS Redfin. You moved all over the U.S. while in the Navy. I think I heard you were in San Diego, Oregon, Cincinnati, Philadelphia, all over it seemed like. After the Navy, you worked at Procter & Gamble for over 20 years. Later, you found your own consulting firm. You married right after graduating from the academy. You married Patricia Ann Metzler, and you were married for 60 years. You had 3 children together. You've always been a fisherman, and you've helped in the efforts of marine conservation, I think in California I read about. You lived in California for several years, but then moved back to southern Georgia, where you live now. You're also currently 91 years old. You became an author and wrote Swimming for Our Lives in 2023. And now, the book I wanted to talk about with you today, Shaking Up the World: Stories of the Naval Academy Class of 1957. You wrote that last year in 2024, or at least it was published then. You wrote both of these books at close to the age of 90 years old. Your latest is a compilation of over 80 stories contributed by your classmates. So thank you for being with me today. I'm excited to talk to you.
Thank you, Servant. I appreciate it very much. I enjoy being here.
Yes, sir. So I wanted to start with asking you, Why did you write the book Shaking Up the World? It's has over 59 authors and over 80 stories. So why did you write that book?
Well, after I finished the first book, and which I was kind of tricked into writing, because I had no idea I'd ever do a book. And when I did that one, a lot of people said, "You got to do. We can't wait for your next book. You got to do another book and whatever." And I said, "Well, I haven't done enough stupid things to write about myself again." So I thought I'd do one on my classmates, and I put the word out to my classmates. I was going to do a story, a book of stories of my class, because they had done so many things and experiences so many things in their lives. I thought that we should share that with the world. And so that's what I did. And they responded. No one said, "Who are you to write this book?" Or "You're not qualified," or "We're not going to help you." They all said, "We're going to help you." And the first thing I did was to put together a committee of guys. I've always learned that I can never do anything myself. It always takes a group. And so I put together a group of really senior officers. One of them is a vice admiral and senior captains, and we had one woman who was retired from the Smithsonian, and she's probably smarter than all of us. she, she, Eleanor Bowen was just terrific and so much help, and all of them were helped. And the process we used was, if the author was alive, I would edit the story and send it back to them to check it for quality, accuracy, and edit it any way they wanted to. If the classmate had passed away and we did the story, then it would go to one of the review committees, maybe a couple of them. In fact, one of them was a retired outdoor editor for the Augusta Chronicle newspaper. He'd been in paper for like 60 years since he was started out as a copywriter or something, and stayed with it and did editing. And he was on this committee, so we had a civilian on the committee, and he was helpful. So the guys would edit it and send it back to me, and that was our process for doing the stories, because I wanted to make sure that they were accurate, and we did a lot of research on them. And I think the thing that I got out of it most of all was I got to know classmates that I hadn't known very well, and I got to know them really well. And that was, to me, was the side benefit of doing this book, was getting to know my classmates. And it was a fun process. It's always fun when you do something with a group. And so the group gets the credit, and I don't get the credit for it. The book is a result of a lot of people, and that's the way that I see it.
So you get these guys together, you get this group together. You had the idea, right? So you were the, I guess, the group leader in a way. Everyone thought it was a great idea. You do all this research. How long did that take to do, to get to
It
start to finish?
it took about a year from the time that we started until we got it published, and the publishing process takes a while, but from it takes maybe 5 or 6 months to get it out once you start, because then the publisher becomes a member of the team, and you're working with them, and there are things like, what are you going to put on the cover of this book? What are you going to have there? And we had no idea, and the uh, Alumni Association publishes their magazine, the Alumni magazine, bi-monthly, and it's probably the biggest one in the country of any university that puts out. It's real thick, and every class has a column in there, so everyone can submit items in it. But the magazine came, and it had the picture uh, of Bancroft Hall, and it had a young Marine that was leaving out the door. And we looked at that, and I said, "That is a perfect picture for the cover." And the next day I got a call from my roommate. He said, "Jimmy," he said, "did you get Shipmate?" I said, "I did." He said, "I think the cover would be a great cover for the book." I said, "Yeah, we're thinking just alike." So then we had to contact the photographer and the magazine and get everyone to agree that we could use it for the book. And I think that was a fun way of doing it because they all agreed. And of course, when I finished, the mother had contracted to take a picture of the young man leaving. He had just graduated and leaving, and she had contracted with a photographer to do it. And so we sent the mother a book, we sent the contractor a book, and then I sent 5 books to the members of the Shipmate magazine. So everybody got covered with free books.
Everyone got covered with free books, yeah.
Yeah.
I heard that the proceeds of this book you're donating back to the Naval Academy.
Yes. They're contracted. The publisher sends a check to them, and uh, it goes to the foundation, and within the foundation, for our 50th anniversary, we decided to sponsor a history department professor to teach naval heritage, and so we raised a lot of money to endow that fund. And so this is going to supplement the money to pay for the professor to teach naval heritage at the Naval Academy and the history department. So we have one of the members of my review committee is a former department head of the history department. So I've got so much talent. I am such a peon to all this, and I got so much talent to help me work with all this stuff. It's just remarkable. But yeah, the proceeds. And now that we have an audio book of it, we have contracts with Amazon, and they are sending checks to the alumni foundation. In fact, I got a phone call last week, and they said we got this check, and it's just got Audible on it from Amazon. And I said, yeah, that's for the sale of audio books. And so we've already started selling some already, and I don't know how much. It was like $18 or something like that. I said, put it in that fund because we have 4 funds at the in the alumni association. I said, put it in that fund. So we got that all set.
Let me ask you this. Why did you feel it was important to get those stories down?
Well, let me put it this way: the Naval Academy was founded in 1845. There has never been a book like this one. There've been probably hundreds and hundreds of books written about the Naval Academy, the Navy, and so forth. But mostly, if someone does a book, it's about them. Our book is about 59 authors. That makes it a unique book. So the foundation said your book is one of a kind. So I just think there were so many stories. I mean, how many people can say I had a classmate that walked on the moon? I had a classmate that was the architect of GPS, which is monumental. Everybody uses that. And Brad Parkinson was the one that did it for us. How many people could say that? And I had so many uke experiences. How many can say that they had a classmate that survived Auschwitz? Uh, and his story is remarkable. And the stories of the guy that was a fish farmer in the Philippines in Crasher Naval Academy, and and somebody that was a NFL referee, and his story is a knee jerking laugh out loud, as knee slapping out laugh out loud stories. And there's so many stories in here that are so funny and so unique. They're not all war stories. Of course, there's some that were during the war period, of course, but they're not just we killed the enemy or something like that. They're what happened that was a unique experience that was kind of funny and or humorous to go along with it. I told them that to have a story in this book, it's got to have a twist to it. It can't just be I was born here and I did this. It's not going to be bios. Bios are very boring, and we're not going to put that in the book. So a couple of them tried that. I said that didn't work, and there were stories that didn't quite make the count. But I think we got some good stories in the book, and I think the feedback is great. The people enjoy the stories. They enjoy the book. It's a book that's a lot of fun to read. It's educational, and a lot of people find it very inspiring. It inspires me when I read the stories. I can't believe some of these stories. They're just remarkable.
Yes, I wanted to I think it's a good time to ask you, can you tell me one of these inspirational stories from the book?
Yeah, I can. I want to tell you one that's a fairy tale. Uh, and the name of the story is Janitor to Admiral. Bruce DeMars was a young teenager that worked as an assistant janitor at a bank in Chicago. He lived in a very poor neighborhood. He had absolutely zero future. I mean, he was not going anywhere because he had no support at home. And he worked at the bank, like I said, and but the bank owners took a liking to him. And he mentioned to him that, oh, my dream would be to go to the Naval Academy. He said, I know it's not possible, and I know I'm probably not ever going to college or anything, but I'd love to go to Annapolis. And somebody owed the bank a favor, and they got him an appointment to Annapolis. So he gets to the Naval Academy, and he does well academically. He graduates, goes into submarine force, is selected by Rickover for the nuclear program, and advances up the ranks and becomes a four-star admiral, one of the top admirals in the Navy. And he was the director of the nuclear reactors, all the nuclear reactors in the Navy. And he served in that capacity for, I think, 8 years. And he did so much, but we have nothing in the book about what he did. The story is Janitor to Admiral and that twist. Now, I'll tell you what happened. When I finished editing his story and I sent it back to him, I didn't get a reply. So I said, Bruce, have you had a chance to read your story yet? No answer. Bruce, have you read your story yet? Eventually, I got a telephone call from his son. He said, Dad has not been doing well lately. But he said, I read the story to him. And when I finished, he just looked up at me from the pillow and he said, I want to buy that book.
I wanna
He spent 43 years in the Navy, and it just made such a contribution, and it's just one of my favorite stories. I just love it, and he was such an remarkable, and he died 2 weeks after that, after I talked to him. So
Wow.
we lost Bruce, but he gave his all for the country.
Wow. But you have his story down though for generations to come, you know? If you didn't go down this path, that wouldn't that may not be true, you know?
That'd be lost. It'd
Right.
fade away. It'd fade away.
So you go to all your classmates, maybe some of their kids, because they are older now, right?
Yeah.
And you want to write down their stories. Was everyone good with getting their stories written down? Were there some that they didn't want to write and put in the book?
I didn't really have trouble with anyone not writing. The problem I had was some people sent too many stories. And I said, "Well, I've gotta think about limiting it, and yet I don't wanna shut everybody off." And that was probably more of a problem than getting them. I got there were stories I wanted that I didn't get, and there were some that I didn't know about that I didn't get until too late. So that always happens, but we got a lot, and it's a relatively big book, and I guess I'm glad it's probably not much bigger. I think it could be too much. My first book was like 200 pages, and this one's over 300, so it's a bigger book. But I think we got the stories that we wanted, and I think the kids there's stories in the book that are written by them when they were kids. They're kids' stories in the book. I had two stories in the book about the kids that were witness to the Pearl Harbor attack. The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. And one was 4 years old, little girl, and the other was an 8-year-old little boy. And those are good stories. to tell. I think if you want me to tell those stories.
So yeah, can go ahead and tell me about that Pearl Harbor story.
Well, the little girl was 4 years old, and her father was a graduate of Academy, but her father was out at sea. If you remember, the carriers were not in Pearl Harbor. The Japanese wanted to get the carriers, but the carriers were out at sea. And her father was on a destroyer, and he was gunnery officer on the destroyer. So they were out at sea. And so she and her mother and a little brother were home alone. And they lived about a mile from the harbor, their house overlooked the harbor. And when the bombs started coming down and the Japanese planes started attacking the airport, I mean, they were right kind of close to the action. So their next door neighbors came by with their car and said, "Get in the car. We're going to drive to a tunnel and get away from this." And so they got in the car and went to the tunnel to get away from the bombs and the bullets that were flying around. So when it was over, the father came home and visited with the family. The family went back to the United States, and she didn't see her father for 4 years until the war was over. And the family that picked her up were Japanese.
Wow.
And if you remember the history, the United States took almost all the Japanese and put them in internment camps until the war was over because they thought some of them might be spies, and so they locked them all up, which was a horrible thing to do. But this family was interrogated, and they were not put in internment camp. They were considered to be a safe Japanese family, so that was a good part of that story. Tom Arnane was 8 years old. His father was a graduate of West Point, and he was stationed at the airfield. Their house was 2 doors from the airfield.
Wow, 2 doors.
Yeah, and he was standing out by the curb waiting for the bus to pick him up and take him to Sunday school. And when the Japanese planes were coming over and they were strafing the airfield, the empty cottages were falling in the street near him. So this little boy, he walks around and starts picking these up, putting in his pocket. And his dad comes running home and grabbed him and got he and his mother under a table because they were right next to the airport. And when the lull came down, they were taken to a elementary school about 8 years away in the middle of a sugarcane field. And they spent 3 weeks there. And he said it was the most fun he'd ever had. It was like camping because they were on cots. There were other kids there. They were playing games. They had ice cream and hot dogs and all that. You know, for kids, it was an adventure. But eventually, they went back to the United States with his grandparents in Oklahoma, and they were there until the war was over. His dad came home, but he wasn't home for long because then the Korean War started. So his dad went to that. And then his dad went to Japan as part of the occupation. He said that his family had 8 Japanese servants in their house. And the reason for that was the United States tried to give jobs to a lot of Japanese because there weren't a lot of jobs. So they created jobs for them. So they had Japanese help that they didn't need. And he said that General MacArthur was the head man up for the Japanese responsibility to get them going again. And he said General MacArthur was at their house because he was a West Pointer and his dad was a West Pointer. And he said, actually, when I was about 10, 12 years old, I was mixing drinks for MacArthur. Can you believe that? But that's a fun story. And Tom is still alive and lives in San Francisco, and we talk about once a month. We were really close friends, and in fact, he was in our wedding when I got married. So
Wow, so a
yeah,
lifelong friend,
yeah,
still
oh
talking to
yeah,
him.
oh yeah, yeah. Went to class together for 4 years and did everything together. Yeah, great guy.
Wow, that's awesome. I love that story. I wanna go back a little bit. I wanna go back. You've said, you had always wanted to go into the Naval Academy when you were younger, before you got in. You said it was your dream. Um, can you tell me why you wanted to go to the Naval Academy and the struggles you had getting in?
Yeah, I had, I'm not real sure where the dream came from. I guess it was because I was a child during World War II, and my father and almost every man in town went away, and then they came back, and I really admired a lot of them, and I think my admiration for them made me want to do something in the military, and I like the water, and I like fishing, and I just said, to me, a dream would be to go to the Naval Academy. I would give anything to do that. And so at after I got out at when I was getting out of high school, I did not get an appointment. So I went to a military school up in the mountains, in Dahlonega, Georgia, which was a 7 day a week military school, like a mini West Point. And I learned a lot about the military there, which was really helpful for me. And after the first year there, I didn't get an appointment. So I was really concerned, and I went back to North Georgia for a second year, and I got some leadership responsibility that year, and had got gained a lot of maturity, which I think was important. And I went through different equations and math, and so I had a real strong math background. But then no appointment. So I was thinking, well, I'm probably going to go to Georgia Tech this fall and join a lot of my buddies that are studying engineering there, and so I went to play in a golf tournament somewhere in Georgia. I don't remember where it was, but I had a friend from another city that came running out of the golf course. Jimmy, your mother calls. You've got to get home. You got to call home immediately. And I said, well, I'm not walking off the golf course in the middle of a match. I'm going to finish this up and then I'll call. So I called my mother. She said, you have an appointment to Annapolis. I said, oh, that I can't tell you how happy that was. That was one of the greatest moments of my life. And then she said, "But you gotta get home. We gotta get to Jacksonville because you gotta do the physical exams, and they have to do all the testing down there." And so and you gotta be at the academy in about a week. So I didn't have a lot of time. So went down to Mayport in Jacksonville, the air station there, and I did all the push-ups and sit-ups and all the pass all the tests, my eyes and ears and teeth and everything. And then I was in Annapolis, the end of June 1953. And I was,
1953.
oh, and it was the first night there. It was such a joyous night. We had no responsibilities. We had people from every state, all 40. We had 48 states in, 48 states, and from 6 foreign countries. I think the Peru and Philippines, Puerto Rico, and I can't think of the others, but we were all everybody running around. Who are you? Where are you from? What did you do? And all of that. And it seemed like that everyone I met had graduated valedictorian of their class. They were president of their class, and they were captain of the football team. And I'm thinking, I was none of those things. I was a very average guy, and I said, "What am I doing here?" But the one thing I had was 2 years of maturity, and that was a big help, I think, because I had grown up a lot, and I had a lot of good courses, at North Georgia, and, I took Spanish for 2 years, and I was gonna take it at the academy. That was the only optional course we had at North Naval Academy, was foreign language. What are you gonna take? And I think we had about 5 choices, and, believe it or not, I had some that took Russian. I said, "Man, I can't believe I take Russian." But anyway, that's what I did. I took Spanish, and then I went as I said, I went through differential equation and math, and it was such a help. But that first night there were unbelievable. There were 1,160 of us that first night, and then 4 years later, 848 graduated. So, there were quite a few that didn't make it through. It's a pretty rigorous program, and, right now, it's rated as the number 1 public college in the United States, not private like Yale, Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, but or MIT. It's a number 1 private, and it's rated near the top in literary and math and a lot of other things. But overall, it's like number in 1, which is amazing to me. I don't know where it was when I got in. I just knew that there were a thousand, over 1,000 people applying to one person that got in. It was the hardest school to get in the country when I got in, and I was so fortunate to get in there. I'm not sure I deserved it, but I got it.
Well, it sounds like a lot of people applied. Over 1,000, like you say, got in that year, and not everyone graduates. So it sounds like it's a pretty rigorous acceptance and completion, school to finish, you
Yeah,
know?
well, you've got it's a health issue, it's an academic issue, it's it's getting in trouble, and some people left of their own accord. So there are a lot of reasons that people leave, but don't get a lot of demerits. That's one thing.
What's that? What'd you say?
Demerits, you get,
Oh, demerit.
yeah, demerits. That's conduct.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes, yeah. If you don't behave when you're there, they don't want you
yeah,
for very long.
yeah,
So
yeah.
after 1957, after you graduate, do you go work on the submarines?
The first thing I did when I graduated is that we were required to go to sea 1 year before we could go to submarine school. And because submarines don't have a lot of officers, so when you get on a submarine, you have a lot of responsibility. You can't just go in and say, "I'm going to." Well, you are going for training, but you've got to be higher up on the ladder. You can't start out down at the bottom. So everyone was required to go to sea for a year, and then you could go to submarine school, which was 6 months, and then you were assigned to a submarine. So it's a little process to get there. But I love the submarine I was on, the Redfin, and believe it or not, I'm still in contact with some of the people on there. A lot of them are gone now, but I have stayed. I'm still in the Navy. I'm still I'm still a submariner. Once you do that, you never get away from it, and it's been a part of my life. Even though I'm not in the Navy, I've been actively involved with my class, and the guys that went into the Air Force had kind of disappeared from the class. The Navy guys and the Marine guys kind of stayed together, but the Air Force guys just went away because they went to different bases, different countries, and all of that. And so I kind of gathered those guys up and got them back integrated with our class again, and that was kind of fun.
Can y- can you tell me? I think it's a good time to talk about another story in the book. Do
Okay.
you got another good story you can share with us?
Well, you mentioned a sad story a while ago, and I think Art Aronson's story is about as sad as it gets. He's Jewish and lived in Eastern Poland, and the Nazis were rounding up all the Jews. And his father and mother and his sister and he were put on a boxcar, and they were loaded up and sent east to Auschwitz. And when the boxcar got there and they started getting off the boxcar, the wind was blowing in that direction, and they could smell the burning flesh from the ovens, and they knew that their future was not very good. But the Nazis divided them up as soon as they got off the boxcars. They put the women and the girls in one area, the boys in another area, and the men in another area. He later found out that his mother and his sister were executed immediately. His father was sent to a work camp, and he didn't see him for years. When the war was over, uh, he and his father were not in contact, so he went back to his home in eastern Poland. His father went to New York, and it was 2 years later before they found one another. And then he went to New York to join his dad, and then they went to Texas, and somehow he got an appointment to Annapolis. But he spoke 5 languages. He was absolutely brilliant. And Art graduated 4 years later, but did not get a commission in the Navy because he had some health issues. But he was in contact. We all thought that he was going, because of his language skills, that he did some spy work. Nobody ever said anything or anything, but we wondered what he was doing when he was assigned to Spain or he was assigned wherever he was going, because like I said, he spoke Russian, German, French, Spanish, Yiddish. He spoke all the languages and English. His roommate said, I didn't know he was a foreigner for 2 weeks because he spoke such excellent English. That was,
Wow.
and his roommate is the one that wrote the story, and Art had passed away, but the story in the book was done by Sam Colburn, and Sam wrote about his roommate, and they were really close friends, and that was the way Sam met his wife. They on a train. That the two of them had been to New York on leave, and the 2 girls were sitting across from him, and he said Art was more willing to talk to girls than him, and Art started up a conversation, and he noticed that one of the girls had a book, and it had her name on it and the school, and so he wrote her a letter, and they started corresponding, and that was the one he met on the train.
Wow. So he sees her name and what university and started writing her letters, and then he
Yeah,
married her.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. That was a kind of fun story, but that's a sad story, and there's another sad story. Um, we had, uh, a person that was shot down over Vietnam, and he was captured and spent 5 years and 7 months in the Hanoi Hilton, and he went through indescribable torture. And he was lucky to survive, and the story is a very long story, and I debated whether I put it in the book, but I decided that needed to be recorded, and we need to have that written down, and that history of what happened for those prisoners in Vietnam and how they were tortured and how they were sometimes told they were gonna get out, and then, "No, you're not getting out." They'd get them out and get them ready, and then they had this situation with, Jane Fonda, and where she came over there, and one of the prisoners smuggled a paper to her to tell him his name and that he was still alive to get back to his family. And all she did was turn it over to the Vietnamese, and of course, that caused him to get a lot of torture and punishment for trying to do that. She didn't know what she was doing, but that was a mistake. But the problem was that all of a sudden the B-52 bombers started coming over, and they heard these things, and then you heard bombs going off. And then the Vietnamese came to the bargaining table in France, and they decided to end that war. Well, I don't know whether they ended or called a pause in it, but when they came over to get the prisoners, the Air Force sent one of the biggest planes they had, and they put the ramp down, and the prisoners got on the plane. And when they got on, said the women on the plane that were the hostesses were the most beautiful women they could find in the Air Force to welcome them back. And they gave them fruit juice and something to eat. And the plane took off, and there wasn't a sound on the plane. He said they'd have thought the plane was going to turn around and come back and land, and they were going to put them back as prisoners again. But when the captain came on the PA system and said, feet wet, They knew they were over the ocean and that they were free. And there was plane exploded. Everybody started cheering and yelling and screaming and patting each other on the back. It was because they knew that they were going home. And it had been a long time for a lot of people. And of course, the John McCain story is pretty well known, but this is another story that's very similar with John McCain. And but the book's got the code that used for tapping on the pipes and how they communicated and how they flashed metal objects back and forth to communicate with one another, and all of that is in the story. But it was a very long story that I had to cut down and make it shorter because it was way too long to be in the book. But everything that went on it went in at camp is in the book, and I think it's a good story and good one to need to read. But it's very sad too. But he spent a year in the hospital and then went back to flying status and retired from the Navy, I think after 23, 24 years, something like that.
Wow. I can't even imagine what he went through.
Yeah, it was pretty horrible, really. But it's in the book, and I think it's there. I tell people if you don't want to read that part of the book, just skip over it.
Well, yeah, I'm sure you run the gambit of emotions while you read that book. All kinds of funny and sad and inspirational stories. So let me ask you this. Uh, I feel like you may be someone that has told stories your whole life. You know, you kind of maybe have kids, grandkids. I think that you may be someone like that. I could be wrong, but I know stories are important to you. Why do you think stories matter, especially for young people and younger generations?
Well, stories have go back and have been the foundation for education for all of humanity. I mean, the cavemen put their stories on the walls in the caves. The Indians had stories, and they put it on leather uh, pieces of leather hide for the what for their ancestors or their heirs. And so it's been done like forever for stories and stories and stories. And I guess it's educational in a lot of ways to educate the people that come after you. If you don't put it down, the story's going to fade away. It's going to be gone. And I think it's so important. I've had several people that have mentioned that fact that stories have been the basis of humanity forever, and storytelling for me has just been automatic. I like to, for some reason I just tell stories. I had my best friend from home said, "Jimmy, you've been organizing us and telling stories since elementary school." I said, "Yeah, I guess I have, and I guess that's one of the reasons I got in trouble with teachers because I was talking a lot." And I had a teacher in high school math my sophomore year, and she said, "Jimmy, you take your desk and go sit out in the hall." I'm sitting out in the hall at one end, and then all of a sudden I see Miss Macon, who was the matron of the school and had taught my mother and father, all my aunt and uncles. She came out of her room, and I said, "I hope she doesn't come down here." And I said, "Oh no, she's heading this way. She's coming. Oh and Lord." And she came down there. She said, "Jimmy, what are you doing sitting out here in the hall?" I said, "Well, Miss Macon, Miss Tracy kicked me out of the room." And she said, "Well, let's not let that happen again." I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she turned around, went back down the hall, went back in her room. And I'm thinking, I didn't even know she knew who I was. I mean, she taught senior classes. She didn't sophomore, but she knew who I was. So senior year, she had me in her homeroom. She was, she'd go watch me. But you know what?
Uh-huh.
She was a mentor. And I loved her. I absolutely adored her. And whatever she had to appoint somebody to do something, she always appointed me to do whatever. And when the Optimist Club asked me to represent them in the annual oratorical contest, then she was on the stage and I was sitting in the seat in the empty auditorium, and she was coaching me. So I developed a really strong relationship with her, and I communicated some. We wrote some letters back and forth while I was at Annapolis, and in fact, I invited her to come to the graduation ceremony, but of course she couldn't come. So when I got back to Brunswick after we got married, got back from my honeymoon, I wanted to take my wife to meet her. I said, "You have got to meet Miss Macon." I said, "She was one of the most impressive persons I've ever known." She's a big fan of Shakespeare. She had a bust of Shakespeare in the room and American flag up there, of course. And anyway, I took Pat to meet Miss Macon, and we spent several hours with her. And she was in a tiny apartment. She had retired and she full of books. And we had the best visit of all. That was the last time that I saw her. But at least I got my wife to meet Miss Macon because I adored that woman.
What do you so people that read your book, what do you hope they take away from your book after they finish reading it?
Well, that's a good question, and of course, the people at different people are going to take away different things. I think veterans, of course, are going to remember, and then they're going to identify with the stories because of what they went through, and so they're going to enjoy those stories because they can say that's like what I did. And I think people that aspire to go to one of the military academies, not necessarily Naval Academy, are going to see what these people did. It's amazing that you look at diversity of what happened to these people, other than serving in the Air Force, the Marines, and Navy, what they did afterwards or what they did instead of doing a career. And I think it gives it's like, what in the world happened to these people? And I think you learn that life is an evolutionary process. I don't think you can know what you're going to be doing 30 years from now. You might think you know, and you may want to know, but there's so many decisions in life. And I think you make a decision. Yogi Berra said you get to the fork in the road and you take it. And I think that's the way life is. I think you come to major decisions. And, maybe one of the first ones is whether you're going to go to college or you're going to go to a technical school or just go to a job. Or then you're going to decide you're going to get married or you're going to have children. Where are you going to live? And then what are you going to do when you get there? And then think about your future. You think about retirement. But there are lots and lots of decisions in life. And then you can read this book and look at the decisions that these people made. I mean, the one story in here about a young man that was nearing retirement from the Navy and thinking about what do I want to do when I retire. And he said, I want to do something different. I want to live in another country. And so a job opportunity came up in Manila in the Philippines at a mutual organization, and he applied for it and got the job. So he decided that when he got there, he wanted to learn the Tatatog language, and so he started learning the dialect there. And they deliberately moved to a neighborhood with all Filipinos because they wanted to be integrated. And when he did, he started looking at what they were doing, and they were farming fish. And initially, farming fish and land in a pond, and then they had nets with made of bamboo and nets hanging in the water, and raising fish that way. And so he started on his weekends and after work, he'd go down there and look at what they were doing, and he said looked pretty interested in him. He said one day they came to my door. He'd helped them with fix some things, and they came to his door and they wanted me to do it. And he hadn't thought about doing that before, but he said, "Okay, I'm going into fish farming."
Mhm.
And so he sold his house in the United States, so he had enough capital to get started, and he taught them how to use a what do you call it? A diving rig where you have an air compressor and you have a hose that goes down to the diver. And he taught them how to build that and how so they could go down and fix their nets because they didn't know how to do that. Just had free dive and they couldn't stay down, but with that he could. And so anyway, he got into fish farming. The problem was there were a couple of problems, and one was you delivered fish every day in these big tubs, and you didn't get paid but once a year.
Once a year.
And he had a weekly payroll. And so he was constantly trying to maintain his finances with that situation. And the other problem was typhoons, and they didn't have a very good weather system there. And he he learned how to check on the radio and get a notice so they could try and cover up as much as they could. But he said the typhoons would come there, they'd wipe out everything, and then you had to start all over again. But he had that, and then he went into um, farming. He decided he'd raise chickens, and so he leased 100 acres of land, but he only needed 10. And he studied and got all the help he could on how to build these facilities for these chickens. And anyway, he got chickens and it started marketing chickens, and he became the largest largest chicken producer in the Philippines.
Really?
And then he had 90 acres of land and he tried to lease out the other 90 acres to get some more income. He couldn't do it. So he decided he'd plant corn and he could feed the corn to his chickens and he could sell corn. So he did that. But again, the typhoons came. But anyway, that was an interesting story that you've got on Academy Guide. You look at something like that and you say, I can't believe it. It's a guy that retired from the Navy and he's fish farming, he's raising chickens in the Philippines. Unbelievable story. But I think they're inspirational. When you look at all of them, I think you read the book, you take it away. Well, look what life can deliver. None of these people thought they would be doing these things, but they did. I mean, everything from being an official in the NFL to walking on the moon to doing the GPS and all of these things that these people are doing, you would never have imagined that. In 1953, when we got Bancroft Hall, there was no idea that anybody would be doing anything like that. It was just a miracle. So I don't know. I think you take away a lot of emotions from reading this book, and it's certainly educational. One of the editors, you can read editorial reviews on Amazon. They have underneath the regular details of the book. They've got editorial reviews, and you can click on that. And one of the editors there said it's history at eye level. And I kind of like that because it is history at eye level. It's a professor that did an editorial that's in the regular column with Amazon reviews, indicated that it was not a professorial kind of book because it didn't have 100 pages of research. We did our research; it is in the book, but you wouldn't say that it's a history book, but it is a history book in a lot of ways. And I think at eye level is a good way to talk about the book.
Yeah, that sounds the way you describe it and all the stories, it's like a compilation of important parts, memorable parts of 59 different people. And I think you can it's not probably like reading a book from cover to cover. It seems like it's broken up in
Yes.
digestible sections, you know? And you don't know what you're gonna get, I suspect, from one story to the next. Um, so yeah, can you tell me a funny story from the book?
Yeah, I'll tell you. I've got several. Okay, but I'll tell you a football story.
Sounds good.
Okay. Um, Bob McElwee was an NFL official for 27 years. He was one of the officials that ran up and down. He did only one that's ever done 3 Super Bowls. He did 3 Super Bowls. He was a white hat. And when I announced to the class I was going to do the stories, Bob called me. He said, "Jimmy, would you like to have some stories for the NFL?" I said, "Bob, I'd love to have them." And so he sent me some stories. And my favorite is this one. He said that uh, as a white hat and the head referee, he said, my job was to stand behind the quarterback. And if you watch football, you always see the white hat is standing just a few paces on the right hand side of the quarterback. And he said, my job was to watch the quarterback. He said, I didn't look down the field. I didn't know if a pass had been completed. I don't know if there was a touchdown. I don't know if there's a penalty down there. I have no idea what happened. I watched the quarterback all the way until the play was done or he was on the ground because I wanted to make sure everything was done legally with the quarterback. So he said, but before the play started, he said I had several things I had to do. I had to check the game clock, the play clock, the formation, the substitutions, and a couple of other things. He said, but when I was in Chicago, I had one other thing I had to do. I had to reach around to my back pocket and check to see if my penalty flag was there. If it was not there, he said, I would go to the huddle. I'd stand behind number 34 and I'd say, Walter, give me my flag back. And Peyton would take the flag from under his jersey and give it to him. Nobody in the stands or on television ever knew that happened. Of course, all the guys in the huddle are kind of laughing.
That's Walter Payton, number
Walter
34,
Payton, yeah,
Chicago Bears.
he there are a couple of stories in the book about him and what he did, but he liked to have fun on the football field, and he was they called him Sweetness, and of course there's an award given in his name now, and it's for the person that's I guess done most for the NFL for the football the image, and it's an image kind of a thing. So it's who's the nicest guy in the NFL that everybody admires, and that's given in his name because he was such a wonderful, wonderful person.
Herschel Walker, yeah, I was a big fan of his. I was
Yeah,
always a big fan. Um, so, can you tell me about your wife, Patricia Ann Metzler? You were married for 60 years, I think.
yeah, yeah. I had uh as a Naval Academy, I had a Georgia girlfriend, and I couldn't get her to come up. And when I'd go home at Christmas time for 10 days, I was either fishing or deer hunting or something and spending time with her. And then I only had 30 days off in the summertime, and I was doing stuff there too. And she finally wrote me a Dear John letter saying, this is not much of a relationship, but seeing you a couple of times a year. So anyway, at the Naval Academy, we got a Dear John letter. We posted it on our door for everybody to read. I guess that was therapy. So anyway, a classmate was going over to the University of Delaware for a 3-day leave period and invited me to go with him. And I said, I'd love to go. And I was always open to do anything just about. So anyway, we went over there and his girlfriend at the time, Sheila Cunningham, got me 3 blind dates, and the first 2, I'm sure, were great, but Pat was number 3. And I'm telling you, I had a girlfriend from sophomore year in high school and a lot of girlfriends over the years. Pat was the most unbelievable person I'd ever met. She had an aura about her, and it just knocked me for a loop. I couldn't believe it. And we had a wonderful evening and together. And then of course, I got her address and telephone number, and I was trying to get her to come down to Annapolis, and she didn't have any interest in a Navy or military career. She'd been to West Point with her best friend and dated up there for one weekend, and I said the Naval Academy is not West Point; it's different. And I was telling her about it, but she had her life planned. She going to be a teacher and coach. She during her summers at college, she was an athletic director at a youth camp, and she taught sports to kids. And that was her dream in life of what she was going to do. And getting involved with this guy down in Annapolis was way, way out of her league. She's not going to do it. But I finally convinced her to come down for a formal dance. Navy had the top bands in the country for their dances, and so she agreed to come down. And so we agreed to meet on the steps of Bancroft Hall, which is the largest dormitory in the world, and it's a lot of activity. And anyway, I was going to meet her Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock. So I wondered how the heck I'm going to recognize her. And so I got there, and there was a girl there, and she had on a sweatshirt with Delaware.
Yeah.
She was making sure she wasn't going to recognize me either, because I'm sure all of us in uniform looked the same. But we smiled at each other, and I think our souls met there. I think she was an authentic person, and I think she saw that I was an authentic person, and I think that we just enjoyed being together. We liked each other from the very beginning. And I just said, I said, I'm a long way from getting married because I've got 2.5 more years at the Naval Academy, and a lot can happen during that time. But I said, this is definitely somebody that I want to be involved with. And so, um, we went together for a few months, and finally I gave her the class pin to say that we were engaged to be engaged. And then at the end of our junior year, which was a second class year, I gave her an engagement ring at the ring dance. We have a big ring that's made out for our class, and we take our pictures underneath it, and we get our class rings and dip it in water that came from the 7 seas that were collected at sea and sent back to Annapolis in a binnacle, and we dip all the rings in there, and it's a ceremony that everybody takes turns going through, and so we got engaged, and then uh, we were getting married the day after I graduated. Then for the wedding the next day, I had 2 friends from Brunswick, and one was my best friend ever, went to Georgia Tech, and Mike was in the wedding, and then Carl Croft, who graduated from West Point the year before, and we went away to college together because he didn't get his appointment at West Point, so he went to North Georgia for a year. So he was in our wedding. So in our wedding, we had Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine. And so across swords, we had all 6 of us there, and it was a great ceremony. And Pat Pat had this aura about her, but we trusted one another and we respected one another. And I think that's part of a relationship. If you've got trust, respect, and love, then you've got something important.
Well, it sounds like you guys had a beautiful relationship. It sounds like you were both madly in love, and that's a beautiful life to live.
I tell her I love her every day. She's been gone 9 years in January 1st, and I know we'll be together someday.
If your younger self could sit beside you now, What would he be surprised about to learn about how your life turned out?
I think I was a very average student, and I'll tell you one thing: I was absolutely an awful writer. I mean, I had no idea I was going to be writing, and now I'm writing all day long, almost every day. I'm just writing and writing and writing. Uh, I think he would be surprised that I've developed a talent of writing. I think that'd be one thing, and maybe that's not a big thing, but that's different. Maybe he'd be surprised that I'm still alive. That I made it through all these crazy ventures that I've been in. Uh, I think if he could read all these stories, he'd say, "Well, I can't believe he did all these things and surviving storms and going into submarines and doing those things, the things that I did in the Navy and the adventures that I've been on and catching a lot of fish all over the world. And I think you look at that and say, "Well, I hope that I would love to have done that." But, you know, I don't know how I can do these things. People help me. I tell people, I said, I'm so stupid and so I can't do anything. And I think a lot of people feel sorry for me and help me. I don't know. But they do help me. And I owe everything to others. It's not me. It's just I happen to be at the top and helping. And I think if you work harder than everybody else, they're going to give you a little bit of help. So
Uh-huh. Wow. Yeah, he'd be proud of himself, I would suspect, if he saw the life that that he's lived or he was gonna live, you know. Um, what's your favorite story of the book?
I think my favorite story is about George Phillips. George was a skipper of an ocean going tugboat, which is pretty unusual for an Academy graduate. You think Academy graduate is going to be a destroyer, cruiser, battleship, carrier, submarine, but he's not going to be on a tugboat.
Mm-hmm.
But George was a skipper of a tugboat. He had two chief warrant officers. One was below decks, head engineering spaces, and he had Chief Bosun Bean was the topside, and he was in charge of all of the handling the ropes and the fuel lines and the barges and the ships and all of that. And the crew were mostly petty officers. You couldn't have rookies on a tugboat because the work they did was so dangerous. So he got an assignment to go to Philadelphia, and there's a huge reserve fleet of ships, all the ships that are out of commission that are stored up there. And he got a job to go pick one of the destroyers and take it around Florida to Texas. So they picked up a destroyer, got out of the Atlantic Ocean, and they got this big destroyer behind them. And then they got word that a storm was brewing down near Florida. So he said, "We cannot get into a storm with this big destroyer behind us because it would be deadly." So they decided we'll pull into Port Angeles, which is now Fort Lauderdale, and we'll wait out the storm there. So the night before they got in, George started having severe abdominal pains. So the doctor on the board, who's a hospital corpsman, checked him out and said, "Sir, you have appendicitis, and we get in, you got to go to the hospital because you are in danger." So they got tied up and everything, and the ambulance and the paramedics are up on the pier. So as soon as they got tied up, they come down. George put on the gurney and up the ramp and to the ambulance. So there goes the captain on a gurney. So he goes to the hospital. When he gets there, they decided that it was not appendicitis, it was gastroenteritis. So they treated him for that. And the next morning, they let him go, and he went back to the tugboat. So as soon as he got there, they're all waiting for him. "Skipper, We're going to be here near the best Liberty port in the United States, but none of us have any money. He said, we haven't been paid in 2 weeks. And we got this great opportunity to spend time here in South Florida. But we found out that if you take our pay records to the Coast Guard station down in Miami, that they will give you cash. You can come back, pay everybody off. We can all go to shore and have a great time. And
Yep.
we have a pickup truck for you. That's the way sailors think. They got everything figured out. So George gets in the pickup truck with the pay records and heads south on Highway A1A. And he's got the ocean on one side, he got strip malls on the other. So he gets to one point, and somebody came out of a strip mall without looking, and he had to dodge. He was in the outside. He swerved to the inside to avoid T-boning him, and he scraped all the way down the side of another car. So they pull off the road, and the other driver is really mad because he messed up his car, brand new car, and he got it all scraped down the side. So he called the police. The police came and gave George a ticket, and they took his driver's license. They said, you're in the Navy. We can't depend up you showing up in court. So we take your license. If you get to court at 2:00 this afternoon, we'll give you your license back. So George finishes what he's doing. He gets to court at 2:00. The judge is bilingual because a lot of the cases are Hispanic and in South Florida. And the judge is pretty tough. So he didn't know what to expect. So eventually the clerk calls his name. So he stands up and the clerk reads the charges against him. And the judge says, how do you plead? And George says, not guilty. And the judge says, $25. And he says, sir, let me explain. And the judge says, $25. And George says, sir. And judge says, bailiff, take him away. So the bailiff takes the captain by the arm and locks him up. So now the captain's in jail. So there's a telephone on the wall, and he calls back to the boat, and he gets his executive officer, Lieutenant JG, and he said, I need you to come down here with $25 and get me out of jail. And the executive officer said, sir, I don't have $25. He said, well, pass the damn hat. He said, there's got to be $25 on the boat. So a couple of hours later, the executive officer and Bosun Bean show up. And he looks at Bean, and Bean's all dressed up in his dress blues, looked like he's ready for inspection. He said, what are you doing down here? He said, well, sir, he said, I've never had to bail the skipper out before, and I wasn't going to miss this one. So they're talking, and about that time, the judge comes out of the courtroom, and he sees this group down there, and he and Bosun Bean start looking at each other. And all of a sudden, they run at each other and grab and start jumping up and down. And of course, George is in shock. Can't believe what he's seeing. And he found out that these two guys were best friends in high school. They had joined the Navy together, and they were on a battleship in Pearl Harbor, and a bomb blew both of them over the side. And each had thought the other was dead for the last 24 years.
Wow.
And here they were meeting at the courtroom in Miami. So the judge turns to George. He said, okay, court costs $5. So they paid $5, and George goes back to the tugboat. And he gets on the phone, and he calls his wife. Honey, I have something to tell you. You better sit down. He said, in the last 2 days, he said, I've been in and out of the hospital and in and out of jail, and that's all I have to say.
Oh, that's funny. Wow. Sailor stories, huh? I'm sure that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a funny. George likes that story too, and the group, there's a monthly Academy luncheon in Washington D.C. that a lot of them attend, and of course the classmates all sit together, and they talk about our book a lot and the stories in the book. They get a kick out of it.
That sounds like a good old time.
It is. It's fun. It's really fun.
So, just a couple other questions here. When you look back on your life, the sea, your marriage, your career, and now storytelling, what gives you the most peace?
I think I think my personal attitude is a virtue that I have. I don't I still calm, cool, and collected. I really love other people. And I mean, I really like you a lot. Everybody I talk to, I engage with, and I don't let them go. I've got friends that I've had forever in different places around the country, and I stay in touch with a lot of people. So I bring friendship to myself in that way. I don't do it, I just do it. I don't do it for a reason. It's just the way I am. And I have a lot of friends, and it's like a friend. I got a call about a month ago, and it was someone that wanted to come and spend a few days with me. And I'm thinking, what? He's called. He's inviting himself to come. Anyway, I said okay, and so he came, and this was at the end of September, and he was there for 4.5 days. And here I am, a 91-year-old house with a house guest. That was different. But he just wanted, he had spent some time working with the GillNet issue and some other things. And I guess those meant a lot to him. And he wanted to reconnect and just talk about them. And I felt pretty good about it. We had a good time, and I caught up on where a lot of people were, what they were doing, because I've been away from California for a few years now, and my wife and I were so involved in so many different ways in everything. And when you leave a place like that, you leave your doctors, you leave your friends, you leave organizations, you leave everything behind, and you start over again. But I don't know, I don't know why I'm the way I am. Like I said, my best friend said, "Jimmy, you've been organizing us since we were in elementary school," and I didn't even know what I was doing. But I always felt like I was responsible for whatever, and I typically I get involved and I start helping out and doing things. Next thing you know, I'm president, and I didn't want to be president, but I'm president. So that's just the way I am. And I don't know. I do things. I like to do things, and I guess I'm. If you say, "What has your life been?" I said, "My life has been going from one project to another, and I'm always looking to the future and not the past. And I don't have a lot of troubles that I worry about. And right now I'm working on another book, and so I've got my family thinks I'm crazy, and I was here till 10 o'clock at night and you working. I said, yeah, that's how I start working at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I work off and on all day and the night. And my caregiver spends half the time on the computer and doing stuff and helping me out. It's just, I'm always working on something, and it's always in the future. And it's not, I think a lot of people start worrying about their past and worrying about relationships and those things. And I don't. That's just not my nature. I don't. I let my wife used to say, "They did this to you, and how can you feel this way?" I said, "Well, I don't let things bother me. I mean, people can treat me any way they want to, and that's their problem. It's not my problem." And I think if you've got that kind of attitude, you're going to be okay in life. If you're gonna let other people be the principal influence on your life, you're in trouble. You've got to be in control of your own life, and not that you don't have love and respect and whatever. And the book that I'm doing is on love and relationships, because I think that the relationships are probably the most important thing in life. I don't think that anything is more important than relationships. It could be with your doctors, your lawyers, your neighbors, your classmates, or whatever. But those relationships are number one in life. And if you've got good relationships, and you create good relationships constantly, I think you're gonna have a good life.
Yeah, they recently, I heard they did a study on longevity, and they tried to find out what is it about some people that live a very long time. What was it? Their diet? Was it genetics? What did they find that that was associated with longevity? And ultimately, they found out the people that live the longest are the ones that have the best relationships. You know, that there's that connection they have to others. There's that love that that they have and feel from others. I listen to your life, your story. I see how you are with us talking here, and I can see how you have become such an influence on the people around you, your family. I could see what your wife saw in you that you maybe can't see in yourself. I suspect you've always been this larger than life, having a good time no matter where you are type person. And like your best friend said, you were kind of the glue that held everyone together. You're the one that everyone would look to for direction. So uh you know, you writing this book, it's just a tangent to that personality of yours. So I'm you know, I'm kind of looking forward to what your next book is going to be. I've loved the stories that you've written down and that you've spoken with your classmates about. I think it's a great thing that you're doing, and I just see you just keep on going, and I bet you your family, your daughters, your or your kids rather, and your grandkids are just so happy to have you in their lives.
I know my three granddaughters, I gave them names, and I call them number one, number two, and number three. And they send me cards, and they sign it number one or number two or number three, and the names. I mean, I have my number three granddaughter. I call her Cricket, and and the number one I call her JJ, and she.
What story? So you have family, right? You have kids, grandkids, great grandchildren. What story from your life do you want your family to remember most?
There's no question. I want all of them to know how much I love them, and I don't think there's any doubt, and that they know that there's a lot of love here. Uh, we like to be together as a family. We love each other. We tell one another we love them, and we hug and we kiss, and I think I want them to remember me as being an affectionate grandfather. I think I think they're gonna someday they're gonna wake up and say, "He did all these things." They don't know who I am now. All they know is I'm an old man that loves them. And I know that when the 2.5-year-old gets comes to the door, she comes running and sits in my lap, and she's got a catalog on Friday, and she's pointing out pictures and turning the pages and pointing out pictures of the different things, and I'm telling her what they are. And she wants the shoes off. She takes the shoes off, but she can't see her socks off. I help her get her socks off, and then she wants to go outside. We go sit on the back porch, and we just do things together. And so I think they're going to remember me as somebody that they like to be around, and not somebody that's boring, and somebody that's. I think I'm kind of adventurous. I've always been adventurous, and I think my grandkids are going to look at him and said, "He really liked to have fun. He didn't act like an old person. He acted like a young person." And I tell him, "Well," I say, "Well, I'll tell you something. I'm a 12-year-old in a 91-year-old body."
That's awesome. So, Mr. Jim Paulk, thank you for being with me today. I find your life inspiring. I find your energy and your enthusiasm and your love for people also inspiring. So I want to thank you for your time. The book sounds incredible. I'm sure that all your classmates and all your people that you work with to bring it together are very appreciative to have you in their lives. So I wish you the best, and I will send people uh, your way for your book, so maybe they can
Oh,
buy
thank
it
you.
and then get that money sent over to your charities. So
There's an audiobook available now. Amazon just made it into an audiobook, so it's got a different way of getting it now.
yes, sir. All right. Well, you have a good day. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I enjoyed it.